Welcome back to Real Ationship Goals, a podcast all about exploring the realities and complexities of healthy relationships. Real Ationship Goals is a project of the Prevention and Education team at the Advocacy Center for Crime Victims and Children in Waco, Texas. If you or someone you know has experienced sexual violence or harassment and is seeking support services or needs more information, links to resources and our hotline number can be found in the description. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect those of their organizations or affiliates. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Real Ationship Goals. We're so excited to have you with us again. I'm Kyla and I use she, her pronouns.
I'm Mónica, I use they, she pronouns.
I'm Elsie, and I use she, her pronouns.
And I'm Jaja, and I use she, her pronouns.
So today we are joined by Jaja Chen, who is coming in to share with us a little bit about the work that she does in the community and just to have a larger conversation on the community in general and what it looks like to work in the community and just some of the incredible things that she and others are doing right here in our home in Waco. So we'll just kind of go ahead and jump right on into it. Jaja, would you mind just sharing with us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the everything that you do?
Sure. Yeah. So I came to Waco originally to study in college, and originally my major was in nutrition science, but then I switched to social work midpoint because of my desire to really learn a lot more about engagement with social justice and also interest in potentially getting involved with mental health support and therapy. So then from there was able to work in the community at the Family Abuse Center for quite a few years, getting licensed as a clinical social worker, and then served in that setting for a while, then went on to doing group counseling at a counseling center in town, and in 2019 began a solo private practice. And that's how I was in Waco. And prior to Waco, I lived in China and Taiwan. My parents are from Taiwan, and so we, as a whole family, moved from the U.S. to China when I was in middle school. And so I spent the second half of my childhood in China and Taiwan, and then came here to Waco, Texas, to study in university. So lots of my kind of background, cultural roots is shaped by my Taiwanese heritage and also by the experiences living overseas. Especially in my youth. And so then coming here to Waco was a huge culture shock, especially because of learning, that Waco has just 2% or less Asians. And so it was definitely a huge culture shock, adjusting to Central Texas and getting used to trying to access food or even just like navigating friendships and being a student. But I've been in Waco since 2011, and I basically came here to study and just never left. And so I've just continued living, working here, and now in the present, I'm a co-owner of Cha Community Boba Tea Cafes, which we can delve into more about how that connects my journey. And then still doing some part-time private practice, and then now working with the Asian Leaders Network, which is a nonprofit that we just started last year. So much good stuff.
Yeah, and I was going to say, Jaja, I've known you for a minute, and I didn't even know that you worked at the Family Abuse Center.
I don't think I did either.
Yeah, I was there for quite a few years doing community counseling, so both in the shelter and also outreach. And then the Family Abuse Center services 8 counties surrounding the place, so also doing like rural counseling. So driving as far as even like Ellis County and surrounding counties as well.
Yeah. Was that kind of your intro to mental health? Is that kind of where that switch
happened? I've done an internship at Story Counseling my MSW year, and had a huge introduction to working with like trauma and with youth in particular. And so that's what started me in the journey of counseling and trauma therapy. And then because I didn't have as much adult experience, that's where my first job out of grad school was working with primarily adults at that point.
I would love to, I guess, just give you kind of the opportunity to share a little bit about like CHA community and kind of like its journey. Just because I guess the main question in my head, or we have to do some groundwork before we get to that, but I was just wondering about kind of the like creating CHA community and everything, like how that and like your work in the community integrates with like your work in like the mental health field.
Yeah,
can I add to that?
That's such
too?
a good question.
I also want to add, if y'all face any challenges when it came to truly sharing your culture with Waco. Too,
Yeah,
as
as a startup,
Yeah.
especially. Yeah, so I think a lot of the backstory, because I was working in the community as a healthcare professional and a social worker, and then my husband, who is also my co-owner of CHA, at the time was working as an engineering high school teacher in Waco ISD. And so both of us were working as helping professionals and pretty, involved in our jobs and also just supporting local small businesses, getting involved in the community. And so a lot of our experience was kind of centered around how can we better support the community within our roles and also outside. And we found that it was quite hard to access kind of cultural experiences and events or even cuisines sort of centered around our cultural heritage. Because my husband's also a Chinese immigrant in background, and then my background is Taiwanese American. And so we would have to go to Dallas, Austin, Houston to find those cultural experiences. And after a while, it gets kind of tiring, right? Like having to travel outside of your home to find even things like groceries or food. And so we would always joke like, we should start something because we loved cooking at home. And my parents love tea culture. And so they were the ones who introduced me to tea from a really young age, and even boba tea. And so I would oftentimes invite friends for tea or boba. And then they would be like, wow, this is so good. Like, y'all should sell this. And we're like, haha, that's funny. That's so much work. But we're busy as helping professionals. Not sure if we want to do that. But I think over some time in getting involved in supporting local small business, the idea just continued simmering. Even where in 2017, we did submit a proposal to the Waco Downtown Farmers Market with the idea of starting up our boba tea stand at the time, but we actually got waitlisted. A lot of folks don't realize the story, so we got waitlisted, and so I'm like, okay, I'm just going to focus on social work and not worry so much about this business idea. And then Devin was really adamant on continuing to perfect the recipe. So from 2017 to 2018, you just would work a lot on different drink recipes, tea recipes, and I was always the guinea pig to make sure it's authentic flavor. And so then in 2018, springtime, we got a call from the Downtown Farmers Market where they saw, our application was still waitlisted and they wanted to bring more diverse food vendors in particular. And so we were so excited to launch, and they're like, hey, can y'all start like next month? And we're like, we don't even have like materials, we don't have a business name, like get back to us in the summer. So they let us, wait till the summer once we got our everything together, and then finally launched in June of 2018 with just 4 drinks on the menu and a little 10 by 10 tent and a few tables and set up shop there on Saturdays. Since we did that for a full year. So going back to Monica's question of was there pushback or challenge? I think especially when you think about the idea of just starting, so much of why we wanted to even bring CHA into existence was connected to feelings of lack of belonging and challenge of finding access, representation to Asian culture, cuisine. And so then that already was a challenge within ourselves, personally as Asian Americans. And so I think the startup and the idea was really a way to navigate and manage that personally, but then also knowing other people around us resonated with that sense of not being able to find belonging, culturally speaking, in Waco. So that was the idea. And then starting up the first year as a tent, every Saturday popping up, I think a lot of the challenge was more so like the education factor, because a lot of folks didn't know what boba tea was at this time. And even at that point, it still wasn't as trendy as it is now. So a lot of education about the drink culturally. I mean, there's times we had samples that we would give out, and folks would like
Spit 'em out.
spit it
Yeah.
out or just like be really grossed out.
Yeah.
And not just directing it towards the drink, but there was times where they directed it even towards our culture.
Yeah.
And so that was really hard because, you know, we had other team members who were also immigrants who were part of that experience. And so then I think that gave me more fuel to continue forward in our work. But I think it was also really eye-opening to see, okay, us wanting to start up this idea and wanting to stand on these values of community, diversity, and courage really was a huge risk. And so it definitely, I think, brought to attention the reality of what it means to walk out in this idea. So then in 2019 is when we were able to upgrade to the mobile tea truck. In 2020 is when we opened our shop in the midst of the pandemic.
Yes, I remember the first time going, and I took a picture with the mural inside or the wall. I have that picture to this day. Now we have our masks on. I forgot about that.
Yeah, because we opened March of 2020.
Yeah.
And that was a hugely stressful time, especially as a restaurant owner. The same week that the shelter in place orders came into place is when we were approved by the health department to open shop. So that was wild because we weren't able to do our grand opening because folks couldn't even dine in. But thankfully, we had our own space and had a lot of kitchen space to work with to expand our menu. So we just worked with the idea of to-go orders at that point until the summertime. And with the pandemic, there was a lot of rise of anti-Asian racism and concerns. And so for us as a team, that was really concerning, especially because we are a boba tea cafe and we feature ethnic foods that are connected to Taiwanese and Chinese culture. So I think for me, during that time, I actually wasn't really worried about anti-Asian racism directed towards me. I think I was more concerned about my team and like wanting to protect the team and make sure there wasn't anything directed at the shop or towards them. And thankfully, we didn't experience any concerns. However, part of why Asian Leaders Network exists is because there was other Waco Asian-owned restaurants who did experience anti-Asian racism or harassment, or even just pushback related to them trying to navigate different masking policies, and then it became anti-Asian harassment or racism connected to that, as they're just trying to navigate all these changing policies right in the restaurant setting. And so for me, it was really eye-opening to see, wow, okay, a lot of these different restaurant owners are reaching out to myself or Devin for support or trying to navigate ever-changing policies, and English for many of the folks was a second language. And so it could be really difficult trying to figure out all the things to keep up with during the pandemic. And I found that there was a huge gap in the community when it came to meeting the needs of Asian leaders and Asian small business owners. One, in regards to connection, but two, in regards to like resource and helping there to be more support. So that's then where the Asian Leaders Network first started to gather in 2022 into 2023, 2024.
And then I know, so originally, y'all started opening under the name Waco Cha, but then a few years ago transitioned to the Cha community, which I feel like also just speaks to so much of what you, Devin, and even like the Asian Leaders Network stand for on kind of the role that culture plays in the community. I guess you've definitely probably already hit on it, but I would love to just kind of like sit in that space more of like what it means to really integrate.
Expanded to the temple too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because our mission at Cha Community is to bridge cultures and create community. And so Cha means tea in Chinese. And so a part of why we rebranded to Cha Community is because we already would refer to our shop and guests as Waco Cha Community. And the idea that we're not just selling food or drinks, but really helping to cultivate and co-create community in Waco, and at the time already having dreams beyond Waco. And so as a business, a huge part of our work is connected to our values. And so with community, it's the idea of, hey, yes, we are a business, but then we want to make sure our team is supported and that there is inclusion within our team. And then from there, being able to connect with guests and providing inclusive spaces for guests, and then branching out even further into the community, and especially highlighting and doing more work with increasing representation, not just for Asian culture, which that's a huge part of what we do, but also for fellow BIPOC or underrepresented communities, because that's why we got started, right? Because of the lack of belonging in Central Texas, and then wanting to create a space or a hub, if you will, that was able to increase that sense of belonging through food and drinks, which what better to bring people together on the table than through delicious food and drinks. Very delicious food.
Yeah, I wanted to share two things that I remember. Man, I don't remember what year it was, but when y'all released the strawberry matcha, and the drink is literally red, white, and green, like the Mexican flag. And I remember me and Jeremiah, my husband, being like, my gosh, like there's a drink that has our flag on there. But also we recently, as in me and some friends, did a dumpling folding class, and it was like kind of private. Yeah, it was kind of it was private, and it was at a chalk community, and we got to learn how to fold dumplings, but also different foldings. Like this is like a Korean dumpling and whatnot, and or this is like how you fold it and things like that. And that was so nice. And even hearing the backstory about like y'all's wedding and your, I don't know whose that it was, but doing the dumplings.
Yes, yeah. Devin's grandfather.
Yeah, oh, grandfather, yes. But yeah, I'm like in Mexican culture, food is huge. And just to be able to see that intersection, and also not even just that, but like the BIPOC markets that y'all have there, that y'all host there, has been really nice too. But yeah, I just want to highlight all those things that y'all do too.
Yeah, and for listeners who might not know what BIPOC means, it's Black, Indigenous People of Color. And part of that was, as we actually had a storefront space, then we thought, okay, with our platform, with our physical space, with what we have now as a business, how can we better expand to support the community and to bring more attention to fellow artists or small businesses like ourselves who were pop-up at one point, and to give a platform for folks to also share more of their creations and through markets like the BIPOC market. And we host that twice a year as a way to both give back to the community and also to highlight other BIPOC makers in our community.
Such cool opportunities. And thinking about like the BIPOC markets also just made me think of like the markets and festivals that Asian Leaders Network has started doing even just this year. Would you mind just sharing a little bit more about those, both like the Lunar Year Market and the upcoming super event that we're super excited for?
Yeah, so Lunar New Year was already a huge holiday that we love celebrating, especially living in China and Taiwan. And so honestly, moving to Waco, that festivity just kind of went out the window. And even to the place where some of my non-Asian friends would even ask during Lunar New Year time, like, how do y'all celebrate? We're like, well, we used to celebrate, but it's kind of hard because there's not an actual time off or even as much activities at that time in Waco. And so we thought, okay, we're going to actually start doing some festivities within CHA. So we started doing that. And then we informally at the time, Asian Leaders Network would provide events planning support to the then East Market grocery store. And so we did that for 1 year, along with the Mid-Autumn Festival, gathering different Asian leaders to help support them in event planning, so that the owners wouldn't be the only ones working on planning such a massive event. Fortunately, they closed as a business, and so then went the Lunar New Year Festival at the time. And so then when Asian Leaders Network formalized as a nonprofit, we then decided that we're going to take on major festivals like the Lunar New Year event. And then we decided to collaborate with the Waco Downtown Farmers Market so that we wouldn't have to just be like a standalone, independent event, especially having just newly kind of formalized as an organization. And so this past February is when we did the Lunar Market, and it was y'all were part of it, and so that was so fun. And it was wild because it was so rainy, but there was still so many people that came through, and it was also the first time, to my understanding, that the Lions Dance was performed in downtown Waco for the wider community participated. Yes. And so then from there, we decided, okay, in the fall, we would want to do another major cultural festival. And instead of Mid-Autumn, we determined as a board to focus on Diwali because a third of our board is Indian or South Asian. And so a lot of our board members wanted to see ways that we can increase more understanding about the cultural heritage and just how diverse what it means of Asian American, right? Because Asian American, I think a lot of people assume it's like East Asian or assume Chinese, right? Or Korean, Japanese. But within Asian American is such a broad term that also includes South Asians. And so then we decided as an organization, okay, we're going to focus in on celebrating South Asian culture, music, and feature that within our festival, which is coming up this fall.
We're so excited. I've been seeing the slips everywhere that you had gave us. Yeah, the little flyers everywhere. So that's so good.
Yeah, we're trying to get the word out, and especially since there's never been any other festival in Waco that celebrated Diwali at least. And it is a new kind of cultural event in Waco, and so then trying to get the word out, and also letting folks know that we're doing a lot of cultural performances. So there's going to be Indian Bollywood style dance, South Asian acapella with classical fusion kind of music, and then of course the vendors and different children's family activities.
So excited. I personally was not able to be there for the Lunar New Year market. I was able to be there for setup, but I wasn't able to be there. But I will be at this festival. I'm so excited. Just here. It's gonna be great. But I guess I've been hogging up all the questions, but other y'all have any?
I do if you don't.
No, go ahead, please.
You kind of already touched on it, but like, how does all the community work that you do with CHA kind of blend into what you do with the Asian Leaders Network?
Yeah, and I'll even tie it into, I think earlier we were talking about the clinical work too. I see it all connected, even though I think it seems like it's so different from each other, but I really do see it as all intersecting and integrating together. Because for the longest time I was doing clinical work, so that's more one-on-one or couples, two-on-one. But then from there, starting to work a lot more with BIPOC folks in the community and serving folks who are looking for a trauma therapist that's a person of color, which is actually quite hard to find in Waco.
Very hard.
And so that raised awareness within me even more so, just the need for our community at large to have more supports, especially when it comes to folks that are BIPOC. And so then so much of my work was centered on like racial trauma therapy with this population of folks. And so then my work with CHA community I see as like a broader, so of course the clinical work is one-on-one directed to trauma care, but then seeing the work in CHA and Asian Leaders Network as the community care side of my work. And then helping to cultivate more belonging and inclusion so that folks don't experience as much racial trauma and lack of belonging and all the challenges that can then show up in one-on-one clinical work. And so, of course, it's more long-term vision. And the work that we do with CHA is also connected, right, to our small business and entrepreneurship and all of that. But then with Asian Leaders Network, it kind of went even broader, right? So then it went from, okay, starting to work within this small business and in this setting to then even broader, like I see it as creating an ecosystem of support for Asians in the Waco area. And of course, Asian Leaders Network is not the end all be all, right? We can't be the only ones trying to create support for Asians in Waco because we're one organization. But then from there, hoping to inspire other leaders, empower other leaders, equip other leaders to then do amazing work that they can do in their respective fields, careers, businesses. And so that's kind of how I see it, kind of zooming in one-on-one, but then broadening further.
Yeah, I'm like, that is macro social work right there. That is macro social work. Did you have
not another question, just a comment, but like all the festivals and stuff that you guys are doing, like I was in the Baylor bubble for like the past 5 years. And so like all of my thinking is very much Baylor based. And so like just getting the opportunity to like have these things in the community that you can like go and learn about everything, I think it's really cool.
Yeah, and like making it to be aware events, like to raise awareness about the different cultures around the world and even within just Waco itself.
Yeah. No, yeah, because even like thinking about the Hispanic community, like everyone just thinks, oh, Mexicans. I'm like, there's so many races and ethnicities that fall under Hispanic and Latin and all these things. And education is one thing that is so needed in Waco. But my question was going to be more on the clinical, more on the private practice, but also more on the personal level of, I know that you specialize in burnout, but how do you avoid burnout during, because you have your hands on, you wear a lot of hats, you have your hands in a lot of places. And also this is such a personal thing for you and your community. And sometimes I feel like, you know, as a woman of color myself, like having to constantly educate communities can be really hard sometimes. And sometimes even having experiences of seeing people maybe spit out the boba. That hurts my heart when people don't like, food is just so special to me. So anyways, but how to avoid burnout in that? What are your methods? Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like part of why I moved away from doing full-time trauma therapy was for the matter of managing burnout and reducing the exposure to trauma. Because a lot of folks would be like, wow, you're like doing CHOP part-time and then trauma therapy part-time. How do you manage? I'm like, I wouldn't be able to manage if I was doing trauma therapy full-time. Right. And that's why it's part-time and part-time, which then becomes full-time. Because the child work then brought so, especially when we were like first starting, I think obviously there was a lot more kind of hands-on role that I would have to play. Like I did every single role, especially in the early days. And then as we grew our team, kind of worked myself out of the job and had to really re-envision what my role looked like. And so prevention of burnout has looked like then being able to be part of shaping so many systems essentially within Waco and the culture within Waco. That brought so much agency to my work as a trauma therapist to see like I can make a difference in a different angle. And also to not just have the continuous exposure one-on-one to severe complex trauma, which was the work I was doing full-time before I jumped into CHOP. So there was burnout before. Now, I don't really experience burnout as much because I think being self-employed, there's a lot more flexibility to determine, what I'm putting attention to and the time and what I say yes or no to.
Absolutely.
And part of that really has been now in the present, having to say no to more opportunities, even if I wouldn't want to get involved.
That was all the questions.
I guess just as we're kind of being mindful of your time, being mindful of our listeners' time, is there anything, like what are best ways for like listeners, folks at home, to keep up with like the work that you're doing, to get connected to the work that you're doing? What are the best ways that people can support y'all?
Yeah, so you can find us both at chopcommunity.com and asianleadersnetwork.org on our websites. And you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, for all channels.
TikTok.
We are on TikTok for CHOP Community. And those would be the best places to get in touch. For CHOP Community, it's at CHOP_community for Instagram. And then ALN Waco for Instagram, and then on Facebook as well. And I am still in part-time private practice, and so you can find me on jajachen.com.
Thank you. And also just thank you so much for being here and being willing to share so much of your journey and your work with us. We're very grateful for all that you've done in the community and all that you're continuing to do, and that we are able to be just kind of coasting along the side and getting to participate whenever we're able.
Yeah, and like kind of going along with what we were talking about, it's like when we have community support like that, I think that's how we also prevent burnout, right? Because then we're not doing everything on our own.
Yeah, so thankful for
Advocacy Center or other organizations and folks, right, who are supporting us. And I think people don't realize how much that matters to folks that are doing creative endeavors like the work that we do, because then every little bit, kind of pushes us and keeps us going and helps us to remember, like, okay, this is why we do what we do.
Well, you have huge cheerleaders here at the Advocacy Center for sure, and all that y'all do. But yeah, I guess we'll transition into our relationship goal for today, which I have for us. So I'm just going to encourage everybody, including myself, all of us here, I was trying to think and just reflecting on everything we've been talking about, and just to try a new food. I feel like whether it's visiting a new restaurant, if you're able to, but then I was also thinking about what about small towns. I grew up in a small town where there's like a Burger King and 3 barbecue places. But even if you are in a smaller town, try and find a recipe that you will be able to hopefully have access to the groceries to be able to make, or even if not, researching recipes and learning like what are the cultural origins of this, what is the meaning behind these recipes. I think just taking the time to introduce yourself to something that might be unfamiliar, which can be scary at first, but the way that we break through that scary is by becoming familiar with it. So take that step, try something new. Hopefully you're able to go in person, and I think that would be awesome. But however you can, try something new, learn something new. And then Mónica has our recommendation for this week.
Yes, my recommendation is to go try Cha Community, kind of in connection to Kyla's goal. And if y'all want my order, I get the vegan dumplings, and right now y'all have agua de Jamaica, which is a seasonal drink, but their matcha is so good. I get mine 50%, sometimes extra boba. That is my order. Oat milk, by the way. But yeah, that is my recommendation.
Now I'm just thinking about my order. It's so good. But yeah, so thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Real Ationship Goals. We will be back next week with another episode. But in the meantime, if you're wanting more Advocacy Center content, you can find us on Instagram and on Facebook at Advocacy Waco. And if you're really wanting some more of that special prevention content, you can find us on Instagram at ACCVC_prevention. But in the meantime, we'll see you next week. Bye.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Real Ationship Goals. This episode was produced by the Prevention and Education Department of the Advocacy Center for Crime Victims and Children in Waco, Texas. Interested in more content from P&E or the Advocacy Center? You can follow us on Instagram at ACCVC_prevention or on Instagram and Facebook at Advocacy Waco. Be sure to like this episode and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. Bye.